Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Float on Air, the show where we talk about all things flight, history of flight, all the way up to modern day, and some of the new technological advances we're making with our company Float. I am Bowen Belmer. This is episode 6. I am joined by Ryan Condren and Nick Rogers. Cue the music.
For over 200 years, we have chased the sky. Gravity has tested us, but it has never defeated us. You're listening to Float on Air. Lift off, float on.
All right, folks, we are back. It is episode 6 of Float on Air. We thank you for joining us. First of all, Nick, what's going on? How are you this week?
I'm good. Always a pleasure. Listeners will have been following this TEDx Orlando story with excitement, I'm sure, but we finished our interviews and we have actually made selections about our speakers for our event. So we're currently got emails out offering speaking slots to various people. Can't really say who yet, but there are some incredible topics and talks.
Are you able to say how many?
Event. So we've got 12 for the main flagship event, which is on October 17th. Then we've got 3 salon events, so slightly smaller, but still prestigious events. And we've got a total of 18 speakers across those 3 events.
Nice.
So
remind me again. Oh, I'm sorry, Nick. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I'm just saying it's been quite a big undertaking to whittle down 630 plus down to about 30 speakers.
Yeah, I believe it. What remind me again, is that in person only, or can people view live in October? Like live stream?
It will be live streamed. The October event will be live streamed, and all the talks will be professionally filmed and uploaded to the TEDx YouTube channel. So plenty of ways to watch the talks if you can't actually attend the event.
Cool. Maybe we'll do. Maybe by then we'll have a big enough group following along with Float on Air that I'll do a live stream of your live stream, and we'll watch it. We'll watch it together and get some folks in here to do some commentary. That'd be pretty great.
Amazing.
Very cool. Well, that's very exciting for you guys. That's amazing.
It's pretty cool. How's your week?
It's been good. So we touched on this last week, but this upcoming week will be the first in-person week for Float in our new R&D facility. So that is like a huge step forward for the company. One small space for Float, one large leap for Floatcraft kind, as they say. But yeah, no, we're very much looking forward to it, getting the engineering team in person and everybody else involved to start, working on the physical protos, which is, I can't wait.
God, that is incredible, isn't it? You've got actual real engineers coming to a real office to do real engineering. It's exciting stuff.
As a non-technical person, at least with regard to like engineering, I cannot wait to just see the magic of something go from theory and paper to, hey, here's this thing you can look at or touch and eventually watch fly, which is very exciting.
Here's how we solve this problem through engineering and mental hard work. I mean, it's going to be so cool.
Yeah, very much looking forward to that. So we're in the throes of it right now. A week from now, we'll be already in this space. So very much looking forward to that. But besides that, things are good. I cannot complain. Tell me, Nick, remind me where we left off last week. So for everyone, maybe they're joining for the first time, we're covering the history of flight predominantly through the lens of airships, although we touch on other things as well. And we're kind of doing a historical walkthrough up to the modern day. And then we will, of course, once we get there, we will tackle that bridge when we get to it. And we will cover other things as well. We also cover news at the end of the episode related to modern airship and aerospace technology. Last week, we left off, and I will let you then take over, Nick, as the scholarly fellow of this program. We left off talking about Count von Zeppelin, and there was a cliffhanger right at the end. So I will let you pick up with what that cliffhanger was, and we can move forward.
That's it. So we're in August 1908, and after decades, in fact, of sort of false starts or building airships with no interest, the Count is finally on what looked like the brink of a breakthrough, a brink of success. The German military have said, okay, show us what you can do. If you can build an airship that can fly an endurance flight of 24 hours, we will finally place some orders. And as we said in the last episode, it's testament to the development of airships at this time, 1908, that a 24-hour endurance flight was seen as something that was actually achievable. So the Count's LZ-4, his fourth airship, had set off on that flight and had actually done pretty well. A couple of emergency landings to sort a few bits and bobs out. But on that second landing, the wind had whipped up. The airship had been pulled away from its ground handling crew and then smashed and onto the ground, blown up. And there was this awful moment where the Count, who had been resting in a nearby inn, walks up to the wreckage of his creation like some sort of Hollywood movie, and the crowd parts in silence, and then he turns and walks away without a word. So quite a sad, dramatic story. And weirdly, it's weird how sometimes the most unexpected people are on scene for these things. And a guy called David Lloyd George, who was to become the Prime Minister of Britain, and at the time he was Chancellor of the Exchequer, so Britain's finance minister, happened to be there on a trip, and he watched this happen. And he reported walking up to the field where this the wreckage of the airship was, exactly that. And he sort of saw in the grief and dismay amongst the Germans, they started to chant Deutschland, Deutschland über alles. And he talks about this fervor of patriotism that started to spill out of them. And he's writing in his memoirs looking back, but he thought, what does this mean? What's going to happen here? And of course, we're 6 years away from the beginning of the First World War. So he's obviously looking forward to that. But at the moment, it looked like that's it for the Count. And that would, this was going to be the final end of his experiment. How do you come back from this? But one of his guys, a guy called George Hacker, who wrote an account of his experiences working for Count von Zeppelin, said that he went to the pub or an inn in despondence, and he was sitting there nursing a stein of beer, I'm sure, and someone who didn't know who he was leant over to him and said, just a random member of the public, and said, would you be interested in making a contribution so that Count von Zeppelin can have the funds to build a new airship? So he thought, what's going on here? Count von Zeppelin took the train back to Friedrichshafen, the town on the Lake Constance in southern Germany where his company was based. And it was very much a sort of somber scene. He was met at the station and they escorted him to his office. But on his office, when he got there, he found a pile of telegrams on his desk. The first one was an offer of money to help him continue his work, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And overnight, several 100,000 marks had been donated by the ordinary people of Germany and by some big companies who thought that this is now a matter of national prestige.
And Nick, really quick on that point, was there some type of organization involved in that, or it was truly just like basically what would be considered today like retail investors just dropping money in saying we want to see you keep doing this?
And this wasn't really at this stage investment, it was donation. Like people are donating their money to an individual to carry on work that they see as a matter of sort of the national interest.
It's like the first Kickstarter, but by accident, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, that's a pretty decent way of putting it, because they didn't even know whether he'd want to carry on doing this after having such a shock. So Hugo Eckener, who, if we remember from the previous episode, was sort of Count von Zeppelin's PR guy, basically, and he's ever more involved in the airship business. And he reports going to the Count's office the next morning and basically seeing the Count kind of stupefied that the work that he's been doing for such a long time on his own as almost a figure of ridicule, the mad Count building his crazy flying machines. He's now a figure of national pride. He was a figure of national importance. And so what happened? You have this huge amount of money. In the end, it amounted to 6 million marks. So that's donations from little girls sending pennies, but also these industrialists thinking, now we've got to really rope behind this. And they kind of formalized the Zeppelin company that still exists to this day. Whereas before it was all very sort of on a handshake. No one really had contracts or anything like that. It became very professionalized. They brought in a guy called Alfred Kolsman to run the business side of things. And they established various subsidies to, build the components of the airship. So like the metal rings, also the engines. I don't know if you're a petrol head, Bo, but Maybach, who still make luxury cars, they were founded at this time to build engines for the Zeppelins.
Yeah, I know cars better than airships, honestly.
There you go.
So yeah, no, that's amazing.
You know a Maybach then.
Really quick, just slight pause. So 6 million marks in 1908 is approximately, well, this can't be correct, is it? Yeah, I guess $48 million today.
Oh, that's quite a lot of
in
money.
USD.
I suppose the purchasing power is going to be quite high of that. So that does ring true. And they are building massive flying machines with this money. So
yeah, that's amazing. I mean, it was, so at the time it would have been, it looks like 1.4 million USD. And then if you carry that forward to today, it's roughly 48 million. That's crazy.
Decent amount of money. I'm sure any startup will
if $48 million wants to show up at Float's doorstep so we can continue developing our technology, that'd be fantastic.
You wouldn't turn that down.
Donation, not even investment. Just donation.
Just have it. Just have the money.
Yeah.
It's fine. We believe in you so much. But yeah, so this, and remember as well that one of the reasons that Count von Zeppelin had started this journey was because of the massive psychological impact of having his army career just taken away from him. So now he is having visits from the Emperor of Germany himself. He's been given the highest awards that the German Empire can provide, and 20 years out of 20 years after he was thrown out of the army, he is finally recognized for what he's achieved. Hello, Ryan. How are you?
There he is.
Hey guys. Doing good. Sorry I'm running late here.
Oh, no worries. We're we already addressed it. We said we'd slide you right in. Actually, I don't know if we addressed it on the recording or not, but that's okay. We did before. Hello.
You got to be nice and natural, and here we are.
You got to get me caught up on what I miss.
We missed. I actually didn't give the name for what this came to be called. It's called the Miracle at Echterdingen. Not the easiest name.
It rolls right off the tongue for us
exactly.
English speakers. Yeah.
Echterdingen was the little village in Germany where Count von Zeppelin's airship had basically been destroyed, and then overnight, as this national outpouring of people sending in money, not investments, donations, pennies, hundreds of marks, thousands of marks, hundreds of thousands of marks, and it all added up to 6 million in the end, and it enabled the Count to become like a national hero, and more importantly, perhaps, carry on with the work of building airships.
Which, by the way, Ryan, 6 million marks in 1908 was apparently $1.4 million, which is about 48 million today, if AI is correct. So I invited the community to donate $48 million to Float R&D if they would like to.
Of donations.
Donations,
Jeez.
yeah, not even investments, donations.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So then, I guess, to pick it up, that was all very good, but if you remember, the whole point of this was that they were going to do a 24-hour endurance flight, and the airship hadn't done it. It hadn't been able to do it, so they had to face the fact that the technology wasn't quite there yet. So it still had a way to go. The army well, they couldn't really ignore what happened, and they couldn't ignore Count von Zeppelin's new status as this celebrity. So they agreed to buy his previous airship, the LZ-3, and then they agreed to buy his next airship, which is the LZ-5, but they still insisted on their 24-hour endurance flight. And that attempt took place in May 1909, and they did pretty well. They flew over George Hackett, who was the guy I mentioned who was in the pub and had that stranger come up to him and say, "Do you want to donate some money?" They flew over his house, and he was in the airship looking down through binoculars and saw his dad on the porch of his house looking up at them with binoculars. So a nice little moment for George Hacker. And they got pretty far, and they ended up flying and landing back at Friedrichshafen, and they flew for 21 hours. So they're getting agonizingly close to this 24-hour.
What year was this?
24-hour flight. This is 1909, May 1909. Yeah, so the idea of an aircraft being able to do a 24-hour or even 21-hour flight in 1909 is quite something.
And what year was Kitty Hawk?
1903.
Wow.
And
So we're literally six years later, they're already doing 24-hour flights. You know, it's funny, like in modern day tech, we think about like six years and like how astronomically fast we went from like the iPhone 1 to, you know, all the latest and greatest tech. And now we have these self-driving cars and all this stuff. But 6 years is essentially COVID to today.
Yeah. Oh God. It's well. There's something weird about that particular timeline that doesn't make sense. COVID to today. It doesn't seem like 6 years at all. It seems like 5 minutes. Right.
Right.
But yeah,
Yeah.
it's incredible. But then aviation technology. I mean, airplanes took a bit longer than airships to match the kind of range that airships could have. But then there's this exponential growth, particularly with aeroplanes. And I mean, so much of it is World War One providing a boost, and then World War Two providing a literally stratospheric boost for aeroplanes, and airships kind of they get to a point, then obviously get somewhat left behind until pretty much the present day. And I guess that's where float comes in, isn't it?
That's right. Picking up the torch.
Exactly. So, where were we? Back to the LZ-5, which was the next one. And at the moment, all of Count Zeppelin's focus is on getting the military to buy some of these airships. He had the military in mind from the very, very beginning. Former army officer, it's his kind of world. It's what he grew up in.
Relatable.
So exactly. That's what that's the frame of reference that he has, and he kept trying. He had the LZ-5. They did buy it in the end, but it wasn't doing what they wanted them to do. The Count had always had a really awkward relationship with the German military high command. There's all kinds of politics in the sort of the war ministry, and Count von Zeppelin was rarely on the right side. So yet again, there was a crisis point in the airship world, in the Zeppelin world, because the army refused to buy the LZ-6, which is the one that came after LZ-5. So they thought, what do we do with this airships? How do we make money from this? And the answer came from the business manager of the Zeppelin company, who was brought on with the 6 million marks that was donated to them, and they would do passenger flights. And effectively, they founded what became the world's first airline.
Mm.
There's sort of questions about how, because the whole point was, and there's maps of this network of scheduled flights that you could take all over Germany. How reliable and regular those scheduled flights were is kind of a little bit open to debate. A lot of the flights were sort of A to A type sightseeing flights, but this was a real thing that they were going to do, and the company was called, and I'm going to test my German pronunciation here, the Deutsche Luftschifffahrtsaktiengesellschaft, DELAG.
Wow, you
German
could have totally made that up, and I would never
I
know
know.
the difference.
I think you did make it up.
Yeah.
Nick, is there any? Do you have any data on what a ticket for one of these flights costs at the time? Like how accessible was this to everybody?
These were priced quite expensively. It wasn't necessarily an accessible thing for people to do. And also the Count hated the idea. He hated it. Like he's an aristocrat with an idea that business and trades is beneath someone like him, and it should all be about the honor of your country and military service and all that sort of thing. But needs must. And you've got at this stage this triumvirate that's forming at the head of the Zeppelin company. You've got Count von Zeppelin himself. You've got Alfred Kolsman, who is the business manager, and then you have Hugo Eckener, who we've mentioned before and will mention much more frequently, who's the PR guy, the hype guy, basically, for this. And like so much with Zeppelins, the kind of the hype didn't quite match the capabilities. So all these German cities got really excited when Eckener was promoting this, and they invested in DELAG, in the airline. They built hangars. They all sat on the boards of directors, and they started planning these scheduled services before they'd even done a single flight. And the first flight they did, which was a promotional flight, was an absolute disaster. It's almost a comic level of disaster in how bad it was, because it took off from Düsseldorf. This was the LZ-4 Deutschland, it was called. And if you look it up, you can probably find images of the passenger car, which looks like kind of a railway, like a luxury railway carriage with seats either side, big windows. Quite nice. Would have been quite a nice experience to have flown on it, but not on this first flight. They took off from Düsseldorf, and they had all these journalists on board. They packed the flight full of journalists, which I don't think you should ever do. Certainly not on your first flight. Fill it with the press. And they were serving champagne and caviar to these people. And then they flew into an intense storm. Basically, first they had a tailwind, and they were being blown effectively uncontrollably forward. They couldn't turn it around, and then they had engine failure, so they were at the mercy of the wind. They had no radio, so the captain dropped a message over the side asking for them to send the army. I don't know what the army were going to do with this airship flying around, and they started to fly over the Teutoburger forest. And there's a British journalist who was on board who wrote you got a British stiff upper lip thing. He was obviously scared out of his mind. But he said, the swerving, driving, rain-beaten airship fought inch by inch, sloping steeply first forward and then aft as we rose and fell in the storm. Icy showers fell in torrents around us. Often we hung motionless for a quarter of an hour, with the propellers revolving at full speed, powerless against the resistance of the wind. And remember that Alfred Kolsman, the guy behind all this, is sitting in the cabin with these journalists as they're probably looking at them thinking, what the hell have you done? Why have you put us in this position? But ultimately, it was over this Teutoburger forest. They desperately tried to get it under control, but it shot up to 3,500 feet, which is way higher than it was supposed to go. that caused the gas to expand and blow through the vents. And of course, then it's heavier than it needs to be, than it should be. So it plummets down into the forest, and somehow it doesn't explode. And if it had exploded, that would have been probably it for the whole Zeppelin story. We wouldn't be doing this podcast.
Sure.
But it doesn't explode. Tree trunks like puncture the floor of the cabin. Like there's branches everywhere, wood everywhere. Like journalists turned topsy turvy, and they had to basically climb down off these trees.
Did they all survive?
They all survived.
What?
There was no one was even injured, and I don't.
Oh my
I
god!
just don't understand. It probably won't be surprised. The captain was fired after this flight. Although I don't think it's really his fault, but
No,
they
I
needed a
mean,
scapegoat,
they
I
didn't
suppose.
actually have like a proper weather report, did they?
No, I know. Yeah, they like literally finger in the wind and see where you go. Somehow they carried on. I mean, I all it takes is for a little bit of negative publicity now, and that's it. It's game over. But they were able to carry on. But they had such bad luck because they had one airship that was sitting in the hangar, the LZ-6. They put a passenger cabin in that. They kind of refitted it, but before they could fly it, it actually caught fire in the shed and burned to a crisp. Someone was cleaning it with petrol, which probably isn't the best idea. I wouldn't have thought. And that caught fire, and off it goes.
They're cleaning it with petrol and simultaneously smoking a cigarette, probably.
Yeah, probably.
And
That'll
just,
be fine.
yeah.
Cigarette hanging out the mouth. What's the
Wow,
problem?
I cannot believe nobody was injured or died. That is insane. This is like that there's like that running joke of like somebody saying you're a bad driver or whatever, and they're like, but did you die? And this is like literally the most extreme version of that I've ever heard of. That is nuts.
Yeah, but did you die? So what's the problem? I don't know what you're all complaining about. You got away,
Yeah,
didn't you?
everyone's fine. Yeah, just
And
like they wrote it up.
Pilots do say a good landing is one you walk away from. So I think there was no problems with that landing whatsoever.
Yeah, it's technically a success, I guess. I don't know if this is the right one. No, never mind. This isn't. I was looking for a picture to see if there's a picture of this crashed into the trees, but I do not believe that's what I'm looking at. So never mind.
Well, we can.
I don't want another air rail incident.
Oh, that was yes. The fallout from that, we still feel it. I'm still getting the emails.
Yeah.
But again, it didn't go. It still doesn't go well for the Zeppelin company. And actually, this is now Hugo Eckener. So Eckener was as well as being a journalist, a sort of economist and a publicist, he was also a yachtsman, and he actually had quite an uncanny feel for weather. So it was kind of natural for him to start to take on the role of pilot as for the Zeppelin company. And I mean, it's kind of crazy that there wasn't really any exams you had to do. It was kind of like, well, have a go and see how you get on. And if you're good, we'll keep you on. And he was pretty good. So he'd been training. But then he took command of the next airship, which was called the LZ-8 Deutschland 2. And this was a lesson that he learned the hard way that I think every single person in aviation needs to learn, especially when there are passengers involved, which is that if you're not comfortable for whatever reason taking off or flying, that you stay on the ground. Because this was 1911, May 1911, Dusseldorf, his first flight as captain of a Zeppelin. And he's taken the LZ-8 Deutschland 2 on a passenger flight, like a little sightseeing tour. And he's worried about the wind because you've got to walk this airship out of the hangar. Massive like target for the wind. If you've got even a slight crosswind, you are in trouble. And he wasn't sure. But all the passengers are on board. They're already a bit late. And there's an enormous crowd gathered to watch the ship take off. So he thinks, probably be okay. he was not okay. They took this ship out, and he said it was picked up like a child's toy, slammed down on the roof of the hangar, and they had to get ladders out to rescue everyone. So again, astonishing that it didn't catch fire. Astonishing that that no one was injured. Astonishing that no one was killed. And Eckener, he wrote that story in his memoirs, and throughout the rest of his career as an airship pilot, and he's probably the most famous and successful airship pilot in history, he never took another chance like that. That lodged deep in his psyche, I think.
It would certainly have mine. So understandable.
I don't know whether you can find an image of that. It's quite a famous, well, I say famous in the airship world, of the airship stuck on the roof of the hangar and people climbing down the ladders.
Yeah, let me see. This would be. Give me 1 second, guys. What year is this? 1911, you said?
1911, that's the one.
Here we go. See if I can find a better quality picture. 1 second. It's probably not the best quality photo, but don't worry, some movie magic will edit this out. Okay, probably not the best quality photo, but presumably this. Yep.
That's it. So you can see the passenger compartment in the middle. You've got the ladder with people climbing down. I mean, I'm not great with heights at the best of times, and I think I'd stay in there and take my chances. You can see at the front that sort of you can see the gondola there. That looks a bit like a sort of lifeboat on an ocean liner, and that would have been hung underneath the hull of the airship, and it's been pushed right up against the hull. So stuck in there will be Hugo Eckener and his officers, probably rather embarrassed. So not an ideal moment for the Zeppelin company and for DELAG.
Suboptimal, I would say.
Yes,
There's been again a handful of these moments. I do love, again, I really miss the fashion choice. Well, miss as if I was there. The fashion choices of the day. Everyone's wearing a suit, climbing down this thing. It's like a formal event. What would be considered formal today? We just need more spectacles. There's not enough spectacles anymore. All of the everything feels so contrived now and so planned. And also just, I think social media ruins some of this magic, because the only way to have an experience like this would be, to see it in person.
I agree. And also, I think we're so bombarded by stuff that sometimes it's difficult to feel what is genuinely an awesome site and what isn't. I can't remember if I spoke about this on the show before, but last time that we were in Florida, I'd always wanted to see a rocket launch, always, since I was a kid. And back then in the sort of 90s and noughties, they were so rare that they would hardly ever happen. But obviously with SpaceX, they were a regular thing. And we had the most Florida experience ever. We were in the car park of a Publix, and it was in an evening, and out in the distance you could see the Magic Kingdom fireworks. And then I had my app telling me that there was going to be a SpaceX launch, and there it was, this streak going through the sky. And I genuinely felt awe. I stood there, and it was a bit like when I was a little kid watching that airship fly over my school. That moment where you're like, this is really, really cool. And I'm glad that I've seen this, and I'm going to remember this for the rest of my life. I think there are very few things that can still create that feeling of awe, but aviation, in all its forms, is definitely one of them.
Yeah, I believe it. I have not had the pleasure of seeing one of the launches yet. Ryan and I actually have a friend who is, like, from what I can tell, as involved in SpaceX as a civilian can possibly be, basically, and goes to like pretty much all of the launches, and he always talks about how magical it is. So definitely on the list. This is something though that with Float I really hope we can capture, is when we have our first float craft that we're able to put in the air and show to the general public, I hope, our goal at least is to capture this like magical moment, and try to find a way to make it like really special. And how
It's
exactly that's going to happen, I can't tell you today, but that's certainly on our radar.
it's in your video, isn't it? That concept, the video
Hmm.
that I think it's on your website of the. Actually, no, it's the beginning of this show.
Yeah, the
Of the
promo. Yep.
boy looking out of the car window, and that that moment of childlike wonder. I mean, airships have always managed to capture that just because they're so weird and
Hmm.
huge.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think, going back to the story, um, yet again another crossroads for DELAG, for Count von Zeppelin, and at this time they're having industrial unrest. There was like a strike in their company, so it's not a great time. They don't have a ship. They got this industrial unrest and these strikes going on. Their kind of last chance saloon, although they've been there so many times, I think they probably stopped thinking about it like that. But
Yeah, I wonder. Actually, now that you say that, I wonder, like, when this happened, is there at some point a point in time where they're like, "We'll get through this one, right?" Like,
yeah, we got
we got through the
through all
last
the
one.
last few.
Yeah,
We crashed a whole airship full of journalists into the forest, and that was fine. So
yeah,
well, this is nothing. And actually,
yeah.
what happened was the LZ-10, called the Schwaben, Swabia, which is the area of Germany where this is all going on, or where the Count's from at least. They built that, and finally they had a lucky ship. This was 140 meters long, so pretty big, aircraft. And although it didn't have a very long career, it did have quite an illustrious one. It ended up transporting over 1,500 passengers, had over 200 flights. The Crown Prince flew on it. A 15-week-old baby, the youngest person at that time to fly. So it did well. Also, I quite like this. We've got the world's first airline, and the Schwaben had, really, you can describe it as the first successful commercial aircraft. But the other first was the world's first air steward was on this. A guy called Heinrich Kubis, who was hired to serve the champagne and the caviar to people. And interestingly, he stayed with the Zeppelin company through to literally the end. He was on the Hindenburg's final flight and survived the disaster. So he experienced the entire sweep of the Zeppelin company's long history. It's quite an interesting
That
guy.
is an interesting note.
But they here we get into actually a bit more, Bo, what you were talking about earlier of what the experience was like, the level of luxury. So 600 marks per person for the longer flights. So that's quite expensive for what it was. But they marketed it as a luxury experience, talking about the mother of pearl inlays on the ceiling and the very safe floor. They were very keen to emphasize that you're not going to suddenly fall through the floor of the cabin, and these nice light wicker furniture. They were served champagne, caviar, pate. It all sounds very nice, and you see pictures of these kind of pre-World War One German rich men and women in their finery, sitting there with their champagne bottles, looking out the window as southern Germany rolls by underneath. Must have been a very pleasant thing to have done.
For reference, Nick, that's so 600 marks was about $143 at the time, about 5,000 US dollars today.
It's a
Which
first
that
class ticket right there.
Expensive.
Yeah, that sounds about right to me, honestly, for something like this.
You can fly on a Zeppelin now, which actually would go over similar territory to some of these early DELAG flights, and that will cost you I think it starts at about 400 euros, but you can spend up to like 1,200 euros or something like that. So again, it's not especially cheap, but also not 100% out of reach either, if that's what you wanted to do.
Yeah, you can do it. It looks like a 1 hour private charter, about 12 passengers, for about $6,000 US today.
Is that if you charter the whole airship?
I think so. It says private charter, 12 passengers, $6,000 approximate starting point for an hour.
So you can buy individual seats as well on flights. Like it's the only at the moment the only scheduled passenger commercial operation in the world on airships.
Yeah, this says like €200 at the very low end, and then like €800 at the higher end, depending on like length of flight and other things like this.
That makes sense. It's obviously on my bucket list. I'd love to do that, but it's kind of like getting to Friedrichshafen is not the easiest thing. And then I don't know, it's not the cheapest when you factor. You wouldn't want to do it on your own, so you got other people on there. But I'll do it one day. I'll definitely do it one day.
I mean, that's like the biggest slam dunk birthday present to give you from somebody. So
yes, and yet I'm 40 and no one's got it for me yet. What's going on there?
Nudge, nudge.
Yeah, exactly. And I know my husband listens to this, so if come on, step up.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's cool though. I didn't know it was still that accessible. It's amazing.
So we're in a sort of a moment where DELAG, the airline, actually starts to do quite well. They add another ship, the Victoria Louise, and they met and flew together over Heidelberg. This is in 1912, and that's the first time that two Zeppelins ever flew together. So it was a good moment. It's at this point, because these airships don't last for long, we lose the Schwaben in an accidental hangar fire. But she did her work and she did well. I actually have a piece of the Schwaben in my collection. I've got like this German beer mug that's made out of metal from the airship that they salvaged after the fire.
That's really cool.
That's cool.
Well, that's what they said anyway when I bought it. Who knows if it's actually true? So then, but they in these days, and I'm sure you'll probably envy how quick that they churn these airships out. They already had another one on the blocks ready to go. And this one did the first ever international flight, July 1912. They flew from Hamburg, North Germany, to Copenhagen, flew over Malmo, and then headed back to base. So that, I guess, seems like if you're on a nice like jaunt, little sightseeing flight, but you've got Count von Zeppelin piloting this, and remember that always in the back of his mind, or even the back and the forefront of his mind, is the military. He wants to prove his airships as weapons of war, and this is 1912, so there's tension beginning to thicken in Europe, and people think that something might be coming down the line.
The way you said weapons of, I thought you were going to say weapons of mass destruction. I was going to be like, wow, that's a really hyperbolic way of putting it, but okay.
Yeah. Well, we'll see that when we get to the war, we'll see that the terror that the Zeppelins, at least initially, had way sort of was out of balance with the actual damage that they caused. But the psychological impact was real. And I think it's at this point that the armed forces finally realize they see these airships, often very successfully over long distances, carrying lots of people between different German cities, and think, actually, we probably need to be buying into this now. So,
I was just thinking about how psychologically, this is, I'm sure, not totally historically accurate or even close to it, but it made me think of, have you ever seen the movie 300 portraying the Spartans?
The Spartans,
and they're in war with Persia, and Persia has elephants as part of their military, which, like, if you've never seen an elephant before, would have just been like horrific. I mean, like, they like monsters, right? And this kind of, I could imagine it capturing a similar level of fear if you're in the military for somewhere else, and you've never seen anything like this before, and now all of a sudden on the horizon there's this massive flying thing in front of you. I mean, yeah, that I could see that being terrifying psychologically.
And it's going to fly over you and drop bombs on you.
And do who knows what. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
This is less than ideal. So yeah, the army, well, the military more generally, finally realized that this was a thing that they needed to get on board. And they began, DELAG, the airline, began training German military personnel to fly these airships. And it became effectively a university where loads of people who would go on to become airship pilots or airship crew in the war would sort of learn whilst working for DELAG and flying these passenger airships. And in the end, so we're kind of in 1913 into 1914, there were 3 airships in the airline. The last one was called the Sarchen, and that flew over 10,000 passengers in its career. No accidents,
Wow.
no injuries, nothing. Which at the time is crazy. You think that aeroplanes are nowhere near having anything like this capability. But then we get into 1914, and without going through the politics and the build-up, you've got this series of dominoes that fall, and then in August, war breaks out, and all 3 of the remaining DELAG ships are immediately pressed into military service, and their crews put on military uniforms, and they became part of the German military. So that was kind of the end of DELAG. It was brought back after the war, which we'll have a look at. But I think it's worth having a look at some statistics. So it was founded in 1909, and it ran in its first sort of incarnation up to August 1914. And in total, they flew over 34,000 passengers on over 1,500 flights, and combined, they traveled over 107,000 miles and over 3,000 hours of total flight.
Wow.
And if you squinted it, there was no injury to anyone. Throwing the journalist down into the forest, whatever. I think there was a broken leg. But after
Didn't really count.
there was no injury to anyone.
I mean, that's a pretty good track record after your initial flight to not have anything else.
Exactly.
It's pretty impressive.
Yeah. And I guess they're constantly learning about this. No instruction manual for any of this. They're working out how to properly fly these aircraft, these huge aircraft that are subject to the forces of the wind and to the gas and to outside pressure. They're learning this as they go. And Hugo Eckener becomes very, very good at training pilots, and we'll see that in World War I he becomes basically the German Navy's key airship pilot trainer. So that's kind of the story of the world's first airline. The first aeroplane airline was, well, actually, when do we think it might have been founded? It was in Florida, actually, but when do we think it might have been founded?
Like 1924.
All right, I'm gonna guess it was after the Depression, so I'm gonna guess it was like 1936.
It's actually not that far away from DELAG. They were not that far behind. 1914. New Year's Day, 1914. The world's first heavy than air. I think it was a seaplane service down in St. Petersburg. And I also don't think it lasted very long because they could only fly 1 passenger at a time, if I remember correctly, which doesn't strike me as the best business model in the world. And actually shows how the airships were still way ahead of where the airships, where airplanes were.
I'm trying to think. Do you guys happen to know? I'll have to ask around in my family. Do you happen to know, like, who in your family was the earliest person to step on an airplane, or like what year did someone in your family fly for the first time? Because, like, for example, I knew obviously my parents had flown in definitely like the 70s probably. And then I don't know all about, I mean, unfortunately my grandparents are mostly deceased, but yeah, I'm curious, like, what, because I was just thinking, like, when would you first have felt like, okay, I'll jump on a plane?
That is a very interesting question. So, my mother has never flown in her life.
Really?
She's never even been in an airport.
Wow.
She's claustrophobia. She's very nervous about flying. Although she says that she's inching towards it, so maybe we'll see her on a plane. I mean, if she wants to come visit us in Florida, unless she's going to go on the Queen Mary 2 across the Atlantic, she's going to have to step on a plane. But not that I want to give her any ideas. And so when we were growing up, we never flew. And I first flew to Florida in 1999, aged, actually I had my 15th birthday on the plane, which was quite a nice moment. See, I was 15 when I first flew. And I think my dad had flown only like a couple of years before then for the first time as well. So quite late in my family.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking now. This says that most Americans would have had their first flight between the 60s and mid 80s. So quite a ways after, what we're talking about here still. Which makes sense. I mean, it takes time for like commercial businesses to flourish and like safety regulations and all of those things. But yeah, that's still like far more recent than I think most people probably realize.
Yes. Would you have boarded one of those early airliners, do you think?
I don't know.
Probably not.
Yeah.
I think that's why they had to serve so many martinis, get them all liquored up so that they would do it.
I think a decade ago, I would have. I was a much bigger risk taker when I was like 20 than I am now. I mean, I used to like ride sports bikes. Like when I lived in New York City, I didn't have a car. I had a Kawasaki Ninja sports bike, which now you couldn't pay me to get back on a sports bike. I love them. They're a ton of fun, but I've just seen too many things now. I've seen it go wrong for enough people that it's kind of like I feel like I got out unscathed, And so I don't even think I would ever get on a motorcycle again, to be honest. So maybe 10 years ago, had this been the opportunity, like in that time period, I would have been like, yeah, let's go for it. But not today, I don't think.
No.
It's too much.
Well, I think if we're talking sort of now about, I don't know, post-war airlines where you could really go long distance, there is a glamour about it. I don't know if you guys ever been to the TWA hotel at JFK Airport.
No.
It's incredible. It was a terminal built by designed by the architect Eero Saarinen, and it's this mid-century modern, like straight out of Mad Men building. We stayed there a few years back, and you feel like you're in the height of glamorous flying. And they have outside, they have a Lockheed Constellation, an early TWA airliner. There's now a cocktail bar. I mean, it's so cool, and it gives you a sense of what it was like. But I suppose part of that glamour was because there was an element of danger to it, because sometimes these things would crash. So I don't know. I guess it was more of a risk, but would have been fun. It's Sean Duffy, is that his name? The Secretary of State for Transport, who says that people, not Secretary of State, the Secretary for Transport, who says that people should dress up more when they go flying. And I was thinking,
yeah.
He's probably got this in his mind.
Yeah, trying to get people away from like pajamas at the airport, basically.
Yes, sweatpants and slippers.
I personally, I'm not saying people have to do that. People can do whatever they want. I don't care. I personally do like typically dress purposely well when I fly, though. I don't know why. I think it's this idea that like you never know who you're going to run into at an airport because you just don't know who's coming and going, and like your odds of running into someone interesting or whatever seems much higher there, even though it might not be.
Also, maybe in your subconscious, there's a thing associated with flying which says it's a special thing, so you need to dress appropriately. And is it any wonder, perhaps, that you're now Chief Business Development Officer of an aerospace company? So
yeah, I guess, but I don't know. There is something about it though that does feel like yeah, it draws you into wanting to dress nice. And again, like if people want to wear pajamas to the airport, whatever, I'm not in the business of policing,
Yeah.
outfit policing. But I do really enjoy though seeing pictures from like the turn of the century and a couple decades after, where the level of like formal dress was just was higher. And it
Yeah.
just, there's something
Always.
so aesthetically pleasing about that, like kind of like the Art Deco time period, and like it's so aesthetically pleasing. Anyway, that seems like a good place probably to stop history for the week, Nick. Do you agree? In terms
Yes,
of
I think so. We are in the timeline. We're right at the start of the war, but I don't want to get into the war just yet because there are some
sure,
other things that we've kind of skirted over, and some really cool people. Some of them who are American, who I'd like to talk about.
Eagle
Next,
Screech.
so.
Ah,
Exactly.
I still have this vision of the guy we talked about a couple weeks ago, where he'd go down to the local bars or taverns in his airship, and he'd just
oh,
drop
Dumont,
down
yeah.
from a rope and tether it off and go in and have his drink. And I still have
Alberto,
that.
yes.
Yeah, I still have that idea in my head. I'm just like, oh, that is cool.
I know, it's the dream.
The self flying airship. Right now we have the self driving Teslas. And one day we're gonna have that the self flying car, the airship car hybrid.
Yes.
That one company, remember that company, Ryan? Jetson? Or I don't know if the company is Jetson, but
Yeah, the
the
Jetson.
the product is the Jetson.
Yeah. They have like a little go-kart thing.
Yeah, the Jetson one. Yeah, that's kind of close.
That's close, yeah.
We should do down the line a float collab with Jetson and try to get like a special edition float version made.
Not drop down by a rope though to the tavern.
That's true.
No,
Close.
nothing will ever be as cool as that. You just can't do it.
Yeah.
Sailed.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. All right, so let's transition really quick, you guys. Last couple of things before we get out of here. Just jumping into modern day news headlines. I only saw one headline this week that I thought was relevant enough for the show. I don't know if you guys have any, but the one that I saw was with regard to flying whales out in France. So it looks like they had previously. So they're trying to build a new airship factory in rural France, and a party of environmentalists like made a huge push to halt the project, basically for environmental concerns. I didn't see exactly what the environmental concerns were, although if those groups there are anything like they are here, they will find a concern if they so choose. Ultimately, the courts ruled against the environmentalists, though, and did approve the construction of the factories. So those facilities will be, I think they're going to begin production. I think it was September of 26. So that was kind of the only thing I saw this week that was very specifically airship related. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that or any other stories.
That was actually my story as
Oh,
well.
was it? Okay, sorry.
Yeah. Because no. Well, I mean, it's a fairly big story. Like flying whales have had this rumbling for a while, and it's it must be frustrating. You're trying to build this new thing, and like planning law is what's holding you back, and environmental concerns. But yeah, they've overcome this, and they can start. I think they start their construction of their site in September 2026.
And
Do you
the
know
flying
what?
whales airships are massive. Like they are like superstructures. It's gonna be wild to see what their manufacturing plant size is. Like it's probably gonna be pretty substantial.
Well, yeah, if you think that's how big their airships are, how big is the hangar that's got to hold the thing and build the thing? Yeah, it's going to be enormous.
Right.
But I don't know what that's done to their schedule. It's probably put them behind by quite a bit, I would have thought. But
Do you happen to know
they can go ahead.
what the environmental concerns were, Nick?
My understanding was, and I think I'm not an expert on the specific situation, but perhaps you had something that earlier when you said sometimes these groups can find things that they're just not keen on. But I think that there were some sort of protected species maybe there. I'm not
got it.
100% sure, but the trouble is, all you need is sometimes the suggestion of these things. Oh, there's my cat Abraham making an appearance. Hello, Abraham. And sorry, get out. You need the suggestion of these things, and that's all it takes. That's all it takes to hold your project back for years sometimes, and that's what's happened in this case.
Yeah, that's wild. I also the irony of that is, like, presumably these ships are far more efficient than aircraft would be, like traditional aircraft. And so that is like an environmentally friendly. So it's so ironic, and it makes me wonder if or how organic maybe the pushback was. Not to be a tinfoil hat guy here, but if I was somebody who did aircraft logistics, I would not want to see this project succeed, because it would very much cut into their bottom line. So who knows? I mean, that's a totally baseless claim. It was just the first thing that came to my mind when I was thinking about it.
Which I think Flying Whales, I think they're funded by a lot of government grants. So I'd imagine they probably have some regulators on their side to help see them through. But yeah, that'd be interesting if there's the aircraft industry nefarious dark side of blocking superior technology.
Wouldn't be the first time, so we'll see. I'm looking right now. I wanted to remember, they're strictly helium based buoyancy, correct? Is that right? Yeah, helium.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. All right. Well, congrats to Flying Whales. As we say often, rising tides lift all airships. So
exactly,
it's great news for the industry.
I do, on my my Airship History podcast, I have an episode where I interview a guy from Flying Whales, a guy called, sorry, my cat's causing havoc on my desk. A guy called Thibaut Prue, who's one of their engineers, and he's an interesting bloke. He's worth a listen to.
Awesome. Yeah, everyone check that out if you haven't already. That was all I had this week. Guys, do you have anything else before we wrap up?
Nope, nothing from me.
No, that's it. I find the history of all this incredibly fascinating, and to think that this was 120 years ago or thereabouts. It's wild.
It is, and it must be. I don't know. It must be interesting for you guys to learn more about the giants on whose shoulders you stand as you embark on the next chapter of lighter than air history.
It is true. I think the other thing that fascinates me is the airships that people are currently building look very similar to a lot of the airships 100 years ago. It'd be akin to us, having Tesla come out and show off their first car, and it looks very similar to the Model T.
Mm-hmm.
Be like, wait a minute.
Yeah, I've always wondered the same thing, Ryan, and again, this was part of like the ethos of what we're doing, right? Like, we're trying to do something a very different way than other people have. It's hard for me to believe that design is the optimal way of doing it, and that we figured it out in 1904. Like, it's not obviously the exact design, of course. Like, the internal bits and everything is wildly different, but it's still I completely agree with what Ryan just said. Like, it's jarring that it to the untrained eye, you could show them a colorized picture and be like, yeah, this is a company based out of whatever, Scotland right now, and they'd be like, yeah,
of
sure.
course it is. Yeah.
yeah, of course it is. Yeah. And very interesting.
So what's wild, and this is timely too. I don't know if you guys have covered this at all yet. There were articles back December, it looks like October is the earliest I can find, where a lab study out of MIT, they were able to use AI to come up with a new aluminum alloy that's actually 5 times stronger than even like standard aerospace aluminum. And the crazy thing about it is it's actually 3D printable.
Whoa.
So they were able to give this AI model all the different options for combining alloys with basically combining different metals with aluminum to make an alloy that make it 3D printable. And AI came up with the recipe for the most optimal way of creating these, structures. And now you have a aluminum alloy that is incredibly lightweight and 5 times stronger than anything we've had to date.
That's crazy. Actually, it's reminded me directly of Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, where they make Reardon metal. That's what that is. It's
Yeah.
it's this new alloy that is lighter, stronger, more durable than anything that's come before. I mean, that's crazy. I guess, yeah. To your point, Ryan, we haven't yet, as far as I know, had the application of that kind of AI technology into the airship world. So it'd be fascinating to see how that influences the look of designs.
Yeah, we have the AI world is absolutely fascinating. There's a news story that dropped of this kid that was vibe coding against his robot vacuum. I can't remember which company it was. And by vibe coding to connect to his robot vacuum and to get into the cameras and all that stuff of his local robot vacuum, he actually vibe coded himself into the back door of this basically Chinese product, and he instantly gained access to thousands of these robots all around the world.
Did he use his power for good or for evil?
I think it was for good because he exposed it, and he it's an open source project on GitHub. But he exposed that a lot of these electronics, whether it be consumer based coming out of China or whatnot, there are backdoors or security flaws in their systems that AI can quickly identify. And AI is just doing it so this guy can get into his own camera and not realizing that it's letting him access everybody else's as well.
Everyone else. God, it's crazy, isn't it?
And I just think of how anti-fragile everything's going to become because of this, though. Because like every time an exploit like this happens, it just updates the code base of like every other relevant service that uses similar code, and over time it'll just become like so anti-fragile.
It's at the point now is with Claude code and everything, anyone with an idea can create anything, no matter how complex it is. You could know nothing about fusion and particle physics and all this stuff. And just say like, oh, I have an idea for whatever, and it'll write the code for you. It'll create the software for you, and it's powerful and dangerous at the same time.
Yeah, I suppose you need to know at least what questions to ask to get the output that you desire. Although it can probably help you with that too.
Yes, it can help you with that too, where it will create its own project management list. It will create its own, like checkpoints and tests and all this stuff. And you just kind of tell it what you want the outcome to be. It will reverse engineer it to your outcome.
And here's me asking ChatGPT how to create the perfect roast potatoes, and I could be,
it's good for that.
I could be creating, all these other things.
Yeah, I'm sitting here. Claude, build, float, make no mistakes. Go.
Basically. Oh, I had it code out a full, I had an idea for like a little browser-based game. And I was like, I went to ChatGPT and said, hey, write out a full project spec for this game with these type of elements and gameplay mechanics. And it wrote out a full project spec for me. And then I took that project spec and I dropped it into Claude Code and said, here, build this. And 10 minutes later, I had a full working game inside the browser. It's crazy. So, when I come across articles where it's like this new alloy has been created, or all these scientific breakthroughs, we are just on the cusp of just an incredible revolution with these different materials. And I think aerospace is just one industry that's going to benefit, right? And I think we're merging in where, yes, we've had technologies to make airships faster, lighter, better for years now, but now it's really getting to the point where we can have aluminum that's 5 times stronger. We can have super lightweight and flexible, hydrogen bladders. Like there's so many different things that we can develop and research, and it cuts R&D time now down to, rather than weeks and months, to minutes and seconds. Um, so I think over the next year or two, we're going to see just an epic explosion in innovation, not only in aerospace around aircraft, but in airships as well. Like I think it's just going to blow our minds.
I think that the challenge is going to be, I mean, there's many challenges. One of them is going to be for government to make sure they keep pace. You can't lose this stuff, because if we, and I'm saying we, I mean, I guess the West, the NATO world, however you want to describe it, if we don't grab it, then our adversaries in the world will, and we will lose out. So we need to make sure that we are creating the right legal structures, regulations, whatever it is, so that we can actually capitalize on the innovations that we make. Otherwise, we're just handing stuff to people who will use it to do harm to us, and that I mean that's insane.
This was actually a very big point of contention for the last week and a half over here in the States, Nick. I'm not sure if you were following the Anthropic story with the U.S. government at all.
No, I knew there was a story. I hadn't delved into exactly what was going on there, but.
So the long and short of it, just really quick, and it raises some really interesting questions related to this issue, is the U.S. government has active contracts with Anthropic currently to use their products, and they were renegotiating the contract, and the U.S. government was effectively asking, basically they were asking to be able to use their technology for whatever purposes they want to, more or less. And Anthropic came back and wouldn't sign the new agreement because they didn't want the United States Department of War to have the ability to use their technology for automated weaponry, and also not for what they refer to as like mass surveillance, basically. Which, on a personal level, I think is great, and a lot of Americans have been kind of championing behind Anthropic. Meanwhile, OpenAI took the deal the very next day. And so the U.S. government is ultimately getting what they want, just via a different company. However, the very interesting question that becomes raised in all of this is, if you apply the same situation to a different type of technology, it looks very different. So for example, if the U.S. government had gone to like Glock and said, we want to buy your handguns, and Glock said, you can buy our handguns, but we get to dictate when you get to use them and how you get to use them, that is a very different. Basically what it comes down to is like, should the government have the authority to purchase products and services from privately contracted companies and use them for what they want, or should the private companies have the ability to effectively say no to the U.S. government? And it raises really tough questions, because it's basically, especially applied to AI, who do you want to be the arbiter of what is good? Do you want it to be private enterprise, or do you want it to be elected officials? And the best take I saw on this personally was the argument that the private enterprise side is also elected. It's just elected by the market rather than by, elections. But
yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, it was actually an Eric Voorhees point, Ryan. So it's classic Eric. But it raises interesting questions that we'll have to continue to answer as AI develops and time goes on, as to like, who has the keys to the castle on this, who gets to determine what is and isn't fair use, what is and isn't good. And the project that Ryan and I actually met on is associated around all of those questions, funny enough.
Interesting.
But anyway, enough on that. It was just some food for thought to think about, what the implications of the technology is and how it relates to governance, basically.
Yeah, and I feel like we are, well, the Anthropic story that you described, that's a major like inflection point that's going to fall. We're going to have to resolve this stuff one way or the other soon. Otherwise, as I say, we'll just fall behind.
Yeah, unfortunately, I agree. And especially when you're dealing with other places that don't have to ask these questions because it's already predetermined. So, like, China is the great example. Private enterprise doesn't get to tell the Chinese government no. Like, that's not an option. And I'm not saying that it should or shouldn't be necessarily here. Well, I mean, generally, I'm very just pro free markets, but the point I'm trying to get at, though, is AI specifically creates a very different question than any other product or service ever has in the past. And so, yeah, we will see, and I hope we figure it out, and I hope we do it fast, because I think it'll be in the West's best interest. But
yeah, we're going to need to.
What do we know? We're just airship guys, so let's we'll stick to airships. Yeah.
All right, guys, I gotta run.
Yeah, no worries. I do as well. Nick, thank you as always. We really appreciate it. Ryan, always a pleasure. I will see you in person at our new facility.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Next week.
Time we meet, you'll be in your new home. Fantastic. Well, I hope it all goes well.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we'll have some updates for the community. Thanks, everybody.
Fantastic. See you all soon.
Right. Chat soon. Bye.
Bye.
You're listening to Float on Air. Lift off. Float on.